In 19th century India, an invisible killer was claiming millions of lives every year. People were dying by the thousands from a violent, exhausting fever, and nobody knew exactly how or why the body was being attacked. At the time, the leading medical consensus pointed to the environment itself. The disease was so strongly associated with swamps and damp environments that its very name came from the Italian words for bad air, malaria. The British colonial administration and top medical officials largely accepted this staggering death toll as a fact of life in the tropics. When junior doctors pointed out that certain damp areas were also swarming with insects, superiors brushed it off, with some officials even arguing that mosquitoes were simply nature's way of teaching humans to endure pain. Because the medical establishment was operating on this flawed assumption, humanity had zero effective defenses against the illness. You cannot fight a microscopic organism by trying to clean up the air. This was the environment Dr. Ronald Ross stepped into. Born in India to a British military family, Ross returned to the subcontinent as a surgeon with the Indian Medical Service. He saw the devastation of the disease firsthand and refused to accept that nothing could be done. While on leave in London, Ross met a pioneering Scottish physician named Patrick Manson. Manson introduced him to a radical theory that the malaria parasite, which had recently been observed in human blood, might actually be carried and spread by mosquitoes. Ross returned to India determined to test this idea, but he immediately hit a bureaucratic wall. Just as his experiments were gaining traction in the damp, malaria-heavy region of Madras, his superiors ordered him transferred to the dry, arid district of Rajputana, a place where mosquitoes were practically non-existent. Ross was furious. He fought the transfer and even threatened to resign, realizing that the administration viewed his scientific curiosity as an insubordinate nuisance rather than a potential cure. Before he could even begin to map the biology of the parasite, Ross first had to overcome a massive system of administrative apathy that actively stood in the way of vital medical research. Eventually securing a posting in Secunderabad, Ross launched a grueling, highly controlled research operation. He was racing against time, trying to prove a theory his bosses thought was absurd. He needed hard data, which meant he needed infected blood. Ross began paying local patients suffering from malaria 1 anna, a small coin, to sit and let mosquitoes bite them so he could study the insects afterward. The work was physically punishing. Ross spent hundreds of hours squinting through a cracked microscope eyepiece in the sweltering Indian heat, dissecting the tiny stomachs of thousands of mosquitoes one by one. Despite months of exhausting labor, he found nothing. He was hitting a biological dead end, completely unaware that he was studying the Culex mosquito, a species that doesn't even carry the malaria parasite. He nearly gave up. But this long string of failures provided the necessary process of elimination required to isolate the actual variable. He was systematically narrowing down the possibilities. The turning point arrived on August 20th, 1897. Ross managed to capture a different insect, a dappled-winged species known as the Anopheles mosquito, that had recently fed on a malaria patient. Looking through his lens, Ross saw exactly what he had been searching for. Inside the mosquito's gut wall, he identified 12 delicate circular cells, the malaria parasites, actively growing and multiplying. He tracked these cells over the following days, watching as they migrated from the gut up into the insect's salivary glands, perfectly positioned to be injected into the bloodstream of the next human the mosquito bit. To confirm the mechanics, Ross conducted trials using birds. He successfully demonstrated that a mosquito could bite a sick bird, incubate the parasite, and transmit the infection directly into a healthy bird. The magnitude of the discovery washed over him. He later wrote a poem to mark the date, declaring, "I have found thy secret deeds, million murdering death." The centuries-old myth of bad air was dead. By proving the exact biological transmission vector, the fight against the disease moved from blind guesswork into the realm of targeted science. Ross didn't stop at the laboratory door. Armed with the knowledge of how the disease traveled, he immediately transitioned into a relentless advocate for public health infrastructure. He developed actionable strategies to break the transmission cycle. He mapped disease distribution using mathematical models, organized mosquito brigades, and aggressively campaigned to drain the stagnant water pools where the insects bred. His methods yielded rapid results. In 1902, he brought his sanitation campaign to the Suez Canal zone, and within a single year, the targeted interventions practically eliminated the disease from the entire commercial waterway. This practical success laid the groundwork for modern tropical medicine. Ross's findings directly inspired the sanitation protocols used by Walter Reed during the construction of the Panama Canal, keeping the massive labor force alive in a dense jungle environment. Identifying the biological mechanism was a vital first step, but it was the application of that science, through simple, scalable measures like widespread drainage and sleeping nets, that directly intercepted the vector and saved lives. For his precise, undeniable proof of the mosquito's role in disease transmission, Ronald Ross was awarded the Nobel Prize in Medicine in 1902, the first British citizen to receive the honor. But his global reputation was a poor reflection of his bank account. While his research protected millions of lives and vast economies, Ross himself spent his final years in poverty. As this record notes, he lacked the money-making gift, saving the tropical world but never lining his own pocket. This chart shows global malaria cases from the year 2000 to 2015. Over just 15 years, we see a dramatic 47% downward trend, an ongoing public health triumph built squarely on the foundation of his original research. Dr. Ronald Ross looked past the apathy of his era to confront an invisible killer. His relentless pursuit reminds us that true medical progress requires a sharp scientific mind, driven by an unwavering empathy for those suffering in the dark.